The gunslinger trembled. She didn't. Worth isn't given, she said. It's lived. The sun had barely risen over the rust-colored dunes of Targon. 5, yet the air was already thick with dust. The desolate wasteland stretched for miles, punctuated only by the broken remains of mining colonies and skeletal shells of ancient starships half buried in the sand. The wind carried whispers of old wars and lost lives, and the planet seemed to breathe a silent warning. Only the strongest survived here. At the edge of a crumbling ridge, a crowd had gathered, humans and aliens alike, drawn by rumors of a duel that could decide the fate of the outer colonies. Tessa stood at the center, her boots steady on the cracked ground, her long coat swaying gently in the breeze. Her eyes, sharp and unflinching, scanned the crowd and the terrain beyond. Nothing escaped her attention. The angles of the cliffs, the shadowed crevices, the wind that could scatter a poorly aimed shot. She was waiting. Across the dusty plain, a tall, lean figure emerged. Karzan, the alien outlaw who had terrorized miners and traders alike, walked with a predatory grace. His forearms flexed as he adjusted the heavy plasma rifle strapped across his chest. His scales shimmered in the harsh light, reflecting hues of green and purple, and his mandibles clicked in anticipation. The crowd murmured. Many had fled already, unwilling to risk witnessing human blood spilled. "You should not have come here, human," Karzan hissed, his voice cutting through the wind. "You will die before the sun sets." Tessa tilted her head slightly, a small smirk playing on her lips. "Worth isn't given," she said calmly. "It's lived." Her voice carried over the sand and stone, steady as the wind itself. The first few shots rang out. Karzan's plasma bolts scorched the air, tearing through the dusty ground with deadly precision. The crowd ducked and scattered, leaving only the brave or foolish spectators. Tessa didn't move immediately. She watched the trajectory of the blasts, gauging the rhythm of Karzan's aim. Her hand rested lightly on the grip of her blaster, a weapon simple in design but deadly in the right hands. A shot missed by inches, sending a cloud of sand over her boots. She tilted her head, unshaken, letting the dust settle. Tessa had faced opponents stronger, faster, and more cunning than this. Her calm was not arrogance. It was experience honed over years of survival. Karzan lunged forward, forelimbs moving with unnatural speed. Tessa sidestepped gracefully, using a fallen metal beam as cover. The alien shots grazed the edge of the beam, sparks flying where the plasma met metal. "You humans are fragile," Karzan taunted, clicking his mandibles. "Why do you even try?" Tessa's eyes narrowed. "Because fragility is a choice," she replied, "and I've lived long enough to know when to fight." She moved like a shadow, fluid and deliberate, circling him while keeping low behind the debris. Each step was calculated. She left nothing to chance. The alien seemed frustrated, snapping his limbs angrily, trying to predict her next move. Tessa's advantage was patience, something Karzan could not comprehend. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the jagged terrain. Tessa's strategy was clear. She would not fire until the perfect moment. She had learned long ago that a hasty shot could cost more than a life. It could cost purpose. The alien's arrogance, however, was a weapon she would use. In a brief flash, Karzan surged forward, using his extra arms to swing a heavy piece of metal like a club. Tessa rolled, letting the object crash into the sand, and countered by flipping a small device from her belt. It was a simple flash bomb, but in this light it seemed like a miniature sun. Karzan staggered, blinded for a few precious seconds. Tessa seized the opportunity, sliding behind a rusted hull and taking a deep breath. The crowd, now huddled at a safer distance, whispered among themselves. They had heard stories about Tessa, the human who faced impossible odds and survived. Some called her reckless, others called her a legend. But now, in the open wastes of Targon, 5, all eyes were on her as she prepared her next move. Karzan recovered quickly, snarling at the brief humiliation. He fired wildly, forcing Tessa to dive into a narrow crevice between two rocks. The plasma bolts seared the ground beside her, leaving small molten craters in the stone. Her heart beat steadily, her mind calculating angles, timing, and distances. A thought flickered briefly in her mind. She could end this now with a lucky shot. But luck was not her ally. Experience, precision, and patience were. She had lived too many battles to rely on chance. The alien's movements grew predictable. Each step, each swing, each shot, she had seen it all before. Slowly, deliberately, Tessa moved, adjusting her position until she had the high ground. From this vantage, she could see every escape route, every obstacle, and every weakness. Curzon hissed, noticing her elevation. "You think you are clever, human? You are trapped." Tessa smiled faintly. "Trapped? No." "Observing." She drew a bead on his shoulder, her blaster steady. She didn't fire immediately. Instead, she watched, waited, calculated. Her philosophy had always been simple. Worth was not a gift, not something handed down. It was earned through every choice, every risk, every moment lived, fully. The alien charged, his mandibles snapping, plasma rifle raised. Tessa fired, not once, but in a controlled burst. The shots hit precise points, disabling his weapon and knocking him off balance without causing permanent harm. Curzon fell to his knees, shocked and enraged. For a moment the wind seemed to stop, the dust suspended in the air, as if the planet itself were holding its breath. Tessa lowered her weapon, her stance relaxed but alert. The duel was far from over, but the first exchange had ended, and Tessa had proven her point. "You survive," Curzon growled, struggling to rise. "But this is not over, human." "I know," Tessa replied. Her eyes scanned the horizon, already anticipating the next move. She had faced death before and would face it again, but fear had no place in her mind. Worth was not given, she reminded herself. It was lived. The spectators began to cheer, both human and alien alike. They had witnessed something rare, not just skill but courage, strategy, and unwavering confidence. In the desolate wastes of Targon, 5 amidst ruins and storms, a human had stood tall against a fearsome alien outlaw, and survived. Tessa turned back to the ridge, letting the wind carry the dust around her like a cloak. Somewhere in the distance, the alien regrouped, plotting, calculating. But for now, she had the advantage. She had lived this moment fully, proving that experience, patience, and courage were weapons more powerful than brute force. As the sun climbed higher, casting a harsh golden glow over the dunes, Tessa whispered to herself, almost as a mantra, "Worth isn't given, it's lived." And with that, she prepared for the next challenge, knowing that in the edge of the wastes, only those who truly lived would survive, and that she had already begun to carve her legend into the sands. The sun had climbed higher, and the heat of Targon, 5 pressed down on the dunes like a weight. Dust swirled in the wind, carrying with it the acrid smell of burnt metal from the duel earlier. Curzon had retreated, but Tessa knew he would not disappear. The alien outlaw was cunning, and he hated being humiliated. She could feel his anger in the way the sand shifted with every footstep beyond the horizon. Tessa did not waste time. Her boots sank slightly into the hot sand as she moved toward the ruins of an old mining colony, a half-collapsed facility that offered both cover and tactical advantage. Her eyes scanned for traps, debris, and any signs of life. She had heard rumors of miners being captured, enslaved by alien raiders who claimed this wasteland as their own. Her first priority was to secure the humans. Survivors were her responsibility. They were the living proof of what worth truly meant, not in titles or weapons, but in courage, in determination, and in the choices they made every day. As she approached the colony, she heard low cries. A small group of miners huddled near a collapsed storage shed, their faces pale, eyes wide with fear. Curzon's henchmen had left them behind, assuming Tessa would not intervene. "Stay down," she whispered, crouching behind a pile of rubble. She pulled out a small device, pressing a button that sent a sharp, high-pitched tone into the air. The henchmen's sensors, attuned to alien frequencies, picked up the signal immediately. Somewhere in the shadows they scrambled, distracted. Tessa seized the moment and led the miners through narrow alleys and half-buried corridors, keeping low and silent. The desert wind picked up, carrying sand in swirling sheets. Tessa's mind worked fast, calculating every angle, every possible ambush. Curzon's forces were not known for mercy. They were strong, relentless, and unpredictable. But humans had something they did not: ingenuity. A mind that could adapt, plan, and improvise in real time. Hours passed as Tessa guided the miners through the ruins. She taught them simple defensive maneuvers: how to use rubble for cover, how to set small but effective traps, and how to move silently. The miners' initial fear gave way to a tentative determination. They were beginning to understand what she had always believed. Worth was earned through action, courage, and quick thinking. Suddenly a shadow moved along the ridge above them. Tessa froze, pressing the miners down. Curzon's scout had found them. The alien's sharp eyes glinted in the sunlight, and the crowding dunes made it impossible for them to escape unnoticed. "Don't move," Tessa whispered. She slid behind a rusted beam and pulled a small mirror from her belt. Tilting it carefully, she glimpsed the scout without being seen. His mandibles clicked as he scanned the area, confident, arrogant. Tessa smiled faintly. He underestimated humans. She tossed a small rock toward a distant pile of rubble. It clattered loudly. The scout's attention snapped toward the sound. Using the distraction, Tessa and the miners moved swiftly, slipping into a narrow canyon where the sun barely reached. The miners gasped at the tight passageways, but Tessa's calm presence kept them focused. Every step was calculated. Every movement had a purpose. She showed them how to place rocks to signal their path, how to remain silent even under pressure, and how to use their fear as fuel rather than a weakness. As the group moved deeper into the canyon, Tessa spoke softly, more to herself than the miners. Every choice matters. Every moment lived is a mark of worth, and we are all worth more than the fear they try to force upon us. Hours later, as twilight approached, the group reached a crumbling observation tower. From this vantage, Tessa could see the vast expanse of dunes and ruins beyond. Carson's forces were searching, but slowly their confidence faltered. They were not prepared for the cleverness of humans. Tessa set up a simple but effective trap. She rigged loose beams and metal scraps so that when Carson's henchmen stepped too close, they would trigger a small avalanche of debris. The plan was simple yet effective. No humans needed to fight directly, and the alien forces would be slowed, disoriented, and intimidated. Night fell over Targon, 5, bringing with it chilling winds and eerie shadows. Tessa had the miners gather in the tower, keeping watch over the dunes. The group huddled together, sharing meager rations, their eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and admiration. Tessa sat slightly apart, cleaning her blaster, her mind already planning the next steps. She remembered her mentor, old Jaren, who had taught her everything about patience, strategy, and the meaning of true strength. "Never act without thought, Tessa," he had said. "Survival is more than skill. It is foresight, timing, and respect for what comes after each choice." The memory gave her resolve. Carson would return, but he would not anticipate the cunning and determination of humans. She had seen too many battles, survived too many ambushes, and learned too many lessons to fall into arrogance or fear. Hours passed quietly. The miners whispered stories of their past lives, hoping to distract themselves from the terror of the present. Tessa listened but remained vigilant. Every sound, every shifting shadow was catalogued in her mind. Humans might be physically weaker than some alien species, but in strategy, in improvisation, and in resilience, they were unmatched. Then came the first sign of the alien return, a distant hum, like a swarm of insects growing steadily louder. Tessa's eyes narrowed. Carson was approaching, this time with his full force. He had learned from his first encounter. He would not underestimate her again. "Stay calm," she instructed the miners. "Use the shadows. Move quietly, and trust me." The alien forces arrived under the cover of darkness, their armor glinting faintly in the moonlight. They fanned out across the dunes, searching systematically, but the traps Tessa had set forced them into confusion and delay. One by one, small explosions and falling debris disoriented them. The humans watched in awe, realizing that cleverness could turn the tide against brute strength. Carson's roar echoed across the desert as he realized his strategy was failing. Tessa's patience, observation, and foresight had given humans an edge he could not anticipate. For the first time he felt hesitation, a rare sensation for the alien outlaw. Tessa used this hesitation to her advantage. She moved quietly across the dunes, shadowed by the miners she was teaching to survive. Every step was precise, calculated, and deliberate. Carson's minions were trapped in a maze of confusion and fear, giving Tessa full control over the battlefield despite being outnumbered. Finally, she reached a high ridge overlooking the alien forces. From here, she could strike, disable weapons, and redirect the tide of battle without exposing herself directly. She watched Carson, noting his movements, predicting his next attack. The humans below were learning, mimicking her actions, gaining confidence and courage from her presence. Tessa spoke softly, almost as if to herself, yet her voice carried over the dunes. "Worth is not given. It is earned through every choice, every risk, every moment we face. And today, we will earn ours." As the night deepened, Tessa readied her blaster, scanning for the perfect moment. She was not just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every human who had been oppressed, enslaved, or underestimated. She was proving that resilience, ingenuity, and courage were the greatest weapons of all. And in the shadows of Targon, 5, amid dust, ruins, and the echoing roars of frustrated aliens, the humans began to understand what it truly meant to be alive, to face fear, to act with purpose, and to carve worth from the trials they endured. Tessa's eyes gleamed with determination as she whispered one last mantra before the dawn of a new battle. Worth isn't given, it's lived. The first part of the larger conflict had ended, but a greater test awaited. The humans were learning, growing, and surviving. And Tessa knew that when Karzen returned with his full strength, it would not just be a battle of weapons. It would be a test of human spirit, ingenuity, and unyielding courage. The night had deepened over Targon. 5, and the air was heavy with the scent of dust and ozone from recent skirmishes. The miners huddled inside the crumbling observation tower, their eyes wide and alert. Every shadow, every whisper of wind made them tense. But Tessa stood apart, leaning against the jagged edge of the tower, scanning the distant dunes where Karzen and his forces had regrouped. The alien outlaw had learned quickly. His arrogance from earlier encounters had been replaced with calculated aggression. He would not underestimate her again. But Tessa did not flinch. Her calm was not born from ignorance. It was born from experience, from countless moments of danger survived, and from the knowledge that fear could be a tool rather than a weakness. She adjusted her blaster, checking the alignment and energy cells. She didn't need luck. She needed precision. Every plan she had laid, every trap set, every small lesson she had taught the miners would come together tonight, and it would prove something larger than any duel. That humans could endure, adapt, and rise even when outmatched. The distant hum grew louder, the sound of Karzen's forces advancing like a tide over the dunes. Tessa motioned for the miners to remain still, keeping low and silent. The aliens were moving methodically, scanning the terrain, but they could not predict the cunning of humans guided by experience and courage. Karzen emerged first, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. His forearms carried weapons that glowed with lethal energy. He paused, sensing Tessa's presence somewhere in the ruins above him. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the shifting sands and distant wind. "You think you can control this, human?" Karzen called, his voice sharp, demanding, echoing across the dunes. "I have strength you cannot imagine." Tessa stepped forward, her figure silhouetted against the dim light of the moon. "Strength alone is nothing," she replied, steady and calm. "Worth is not given. It's lived." The alien hissed in frustration, circling, calculating. His eyes glinted, scanning for traps, for weaknesses. But Tessa had already anticipated his movements. Every action, every instinct, every tactic had been carefully predicted and prepared for. Suddenly, Karzen lunged, firing a volley of energy blasts that scorched the ground where Tessa had stood moments before. She rolled aside, letting the blasts hit a pile of debris, sending sparks and sand into the air. The miners gasped, but Tessa's calm presence reassured them. She fired back, not wildly, but with careful precision. Her blaster pulses hit the alien's weapons, short-circuiting them without harming him directly. Karzen roared in frustration, realizing that brute force would not win this battle. Humans were unpredictable. Humans were clever. Humans lived for more than mere survival. They lived to adapt, to endure, and to overcome. Tessa moved through the ruins like a shadow, setting small devices that ignited traps of debris, smoke, and light. Each step was designed to confuse, disorient, and control the battlefield. The miners watched in awe, following her guidance silently, learning the rhythm of tactics and patience. For them, this was more than survival. It was a lesson in courage and ingenuity. Karzen's henchmen attempted to flank her, but the traps slowed them, forcing them into confusion. Tessa anticipated their moves, using the terrain to her advantage. She led the miners down hidden corridors and through narrow crevices, giving them cover while continuing her dance of precision and strategy. "You humans are resilient," Karzen admitted, through gritted mandibles, almost grudgingly, "but this is not enough. You will fall." Tessa paused at the edge of a narrow cliff, her eyes locked on him. "Perhaps," she said softly, "but every choice you make shapes your worth. And we humans have lived long enough to understand that." The alien lunged again, more desperate this time. His strength and speed were undeniable, but Tessa's patience and foresight gave her the advantage. She dodged, rolled, and used a combination of blaster fire and well-placed traps to force him back, gradually tiring him. Each step he took was measured and controlled, but Tessa had already seen the pattern. She exploited it. Finally, they faced each other on the edge of a jagged cliff. Below, the sand stretched endlessly, a drop that would be fatal to any careless step. Karzen's weapons were sparking, damaged from Tessa's carefully placed pulses. His breathing was ragged, his confidence shaken. "You have survived longer than I expected," he hissed. "Why?" Tessa looked at him, her gaze steady, unwavering. "Because fear does not control me," she said. "Because strength is not just power. It is strategy, patience, and the will to live fully. Worth is not given, Karzan. It is lived." The alien snarled, lunging for a final attack. But Tessa was ready. She rolled aside, letting his momentum carry him forward, and fired a precise shot that disabled his remaining weapons and sent him sprawling onto the rocky ground below. For a moment, silence hung over the cliff. The alien lay there, disarmed and furious, but alive. Tessa's hand rested lightly on her blaster, ready if he moved again, but she did not strike. Mercy was not weakness, it was strength. She had won the duel, but she had also chosen the higher ground, morally and strategically. The miners emerged from their hiding spots, watching with awe as Tessa approached Karzan. Their eyes reflected the lessons they had learned: courage, ingenuity, and the understanding that worth was forged through every choice made, not given by fear or violence. "You live because I choose not to end it," Tessa said quietly, standing over him. "Use this time wisely. Change your ways, or you will not be so lucky next time." Karzan's mandibles clicked, a sound that was almost respect, almost anger. He had been bested not just in combat, but in understanding the essence of human resilience. For the first time he saw that humans were more than fragile creatures. They were thinkers, strategists, and survivors in ways he had never imagined. As dawn broke over Targon, 5, casting long shadows over the dunes, Tessa turned to the miners. "We survive because we adapt. We live because we fight for more than ourselves. Remember this. Worth isn't given. It's lived." The miners nodded, feeling a newfound strength within themselves. They had faced fear, learned strategy, and seen what courage truly meant. The lessons of Tessa would stay with them forever, guiding them through challenges yet to come. From a distance, Karzan's forces regrouped, muttering in frustration. But the lesson had been learned. Humans were not to be underestimated. They could endure, they could adapt, and they could rise against odds that seemed insurmountable. Tessa stood tall on the cliff, her eyes scanning the horizon. The duel was over, but the battle for survival on this harsh planet was far from finished. Every choice she had made, every risk she had taken had proven one thing. Humans were remarkable because they lived with purpose, facing every danger with mind, heart, and courage. The wind carried the faint cries of distant creatures, the hum of alien machines, and the whispers of the desert. Tessa knew that Karzan would return, but now she had allies, strategy, and the indomitable spirit of humans behind her. She had shown them what it meant to endure, to survive, and to define worth through action. And in that moment, as the sun's first rays lit the dunes in gold and crimson, Tessa whispered once again, almost as a promise to herself and those who would follow, "Worth isn't given, it's lived." The first light of dawn stretched across the desert of Targon, 5 casting a golden glow over the dunes and ruins. The wind carried with it the faint scent of burned metal and scorched sand, remnants of the battle from the night before. The miners, once trembling and fearful, now stood taller. Their eyes were bright with understanding and determination, and they moved with cautious purpose. Tessa walked among them, her boots crunching over gravel and broken debris. Her long coat swayed lightly, and her blaster rested at her hip, unthreatening now. She had survived the duel, defeated Karzan, and shown humans that courage, strategy, and patience could triumph over brute strength. But survival was only the beginning. True worth, she knew, was forged through guidance, leadership, and the will to shape a better future. "Gather your supplies," she instructed the miners. "We rebuild. And we defend ourselves. No one will intimidate us again." The miners nodded, their movements now confident. For them, Tessa was more than a gunslinger. She was a teacher, a guide, and a symbol of human resilience. They had learned more than tactics. They had learned the meaning of living with purpose, of earning every moment of worth through action, courage, and perseverance. Tessa led them to a half-collapsed control center, once the hub of the mining colony. Its metal panels were rusted, wires hung loose, and screens flickered weakly. But to Tessa, it was not a ruin. It was a foundation. With careful hands and quick improvisation, she taught the miners how to repair power lines, reroute energy to defensive turrets, and reinforce barricades. Every instruction was simple, practical, and precise. They worked together, each human learning the value of coordination, ingenuity, and resilience. From the edge of the colony, she watched the distant dunes. Karzan had retreated, but his presence lingered like a shadow over the planet. Tessa knew he would not give up easily. Yet she was not afraid. Humans had survived far worse. And now, the miners were no longer helpless. They had learned to adapt, to defend, and to fight with intelligence rather than recklessness. Hours passed, and the colony slowly transformed. What had once been ruins now bore the first signs of life and order. A makeshift watchtower rose from debris, providing a vantage point over the dunes. Barricades of scrap metal and reinforced beams lined the main entrances. Traps, carefully designed by Tessa and the miners, lay hidden but ready to activate at the first sign of intruders. The once frightened humans now moved with confidence, their fear replaced by determination. Tessa moved among them quietly, observing. She could see the subtle changes in posture, in speech, in the way their eyes no longer darted nervously. They had learned that survival was not about hiding. It was about living boldly, making choices, and understanding that worth was not given by circumstance, but earned in each moment of challenge. As the sun climbed higher, Tessa took a brief pause, sitting on the edge of the tower. She looked at the horizon, at the endless dunes stretching into distance. Her thoughts drifted to her mentor, old Jaren, and the lessons he had taught her: patience, observation, strategic thinking, moral courage. Every decision she had made tonight, and in every duel before, had been shaped by these lessons, and now they had been passed on, in a new way, to the miners who would carry them forward. In the distance, a shadow flickered. Tessa's eyes narrowed. Karzan had returned, or at least scouts of his were creeping closer, testing the colony's defenses, but this time the humans were ready. Tessa signaled with a subtle movement, and the miners moved to their stations, silently activating traps in defensive positions. Their earlier fear had been replaced by readiness, anticipation, and teamwork. The alien scouts approached cautiously, scanning the terrain for weaknesses. They did not know that every step they took had been anticipated, every path mapped, every likely action accounted for. A minor explosion here, a falling debris trap there. The humans turned the alien advance into a controlled display of strategic advantage. For the first time, Karzan's forces hesitated, unsure and frustrated by the ingenuity and coordination of creatures they had long underestimated. Tessa watched, her eyes sharp, her posture calm. She had taught the miners well, and now they were learning through action. The human capacity for adaptation, for quick thinking under pressure, was being proven once more. And it was not just about survival. It was about living with purpose, defending what mattered, and showing that humans could rise above fear and danger. After the scouts retreated, Tessa gathered the miners in the central courtyard of the colony. She looked at each of them in turn, seeing in their eyes the spark of courage she had hoped to ignite. "Today you have survived," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Tomorrow you will live with purpose. This colony, these dunes, this planet, they belong to no one but those who fight for them. Remember this: worth is not given, it is earned, in every action, every choice, every moment of courage." The miners nodded, their expressions resolute. For them, Tessa was more than a gunslinger. She was a symbol of hope, a living example of what humans could accomplish when they faced challenges with intelligence, bravery, and heart. As the day wore on, the colony continued to grow. The miners repaired old machinery, reinforced structures, and set up watchposts along the dunes. They moved with a sense of purpose, each task a lesson in human ingenuity and persistence. Tessa walked among them, offering guidance and encouragement, never intervening unnecessarily. She allowed them to learn by doing, to discover their own strength and resilience. In the late afternoon, Tessa climbed to the highest point of the tower, looking out over the desert. The wind whipped through her hair, carrying the dust and heat of Targon 5 across the dunes. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, she knew Karzan lurked, waiting for another opportunity. But she was not concerned. Humans had survived worse, and now this small group of miners was learning to embody the very essence of what she had lived through: courage, strategy, and the understanding that worth must be forged, not given. She reflected on the countless battles she had faced, the duels, the skirmishes, and the moments when survival had hung by a thread. Each encounter had taught her something new, something vital. And now, as she watched these humans begin to understand, she realized that her legacy would not be measured in victories or duels alone. It would be measured in the lives she had shaped, the courage she had inspired, and the understanding that humans were more than their circumstances. As night fell once again, Tessa lit small lanterns across the colony, illuminating the paths and work areas. The miners moved quietly, checking traps and strengthening defenses. The colony was no longer just a place of survival. It was a place of learning, growth, and hope. Tessa stood on the tower one last time that night, gazing at the horizon. The wind carried the distant hum of Carson's retreating forces. He had been defeated, not through rage or raw power, but through strategy, patience, and the understanding that humans lived every moment with purpose. She whispered to herself, a mantra that had guided her through every challenge. Worth isn't given, it's lived. The miners gathered below, their eyes bright with understanding. They had survived, yes, but more importantly, they had learned. They would carry these lessons forward, shaping the future of Targon. 5, and proving that humans could endure, adapt, and rise above any threat. Tessa smiled faintly. Her work here was done, at least for now. The colony was secure, the miners empowered, and the lessons of courage and strategy firmly planted in their minds. Beyond that horizon, challenges would come again, but she had proven, and they had learned, that humans could rise to meet any trial. As she descended the tower, her steps quiet and deliberate, she knew this was more than a victory. It was the beginning of a new chapter for the people of Targon. 5. Every trap laid, every lesson taught, every choice made by these humans would echo through the dunes, shaping the future where courage, ingenuity, and perseverance were more powerful than fear, force, or oppression. And as the wind carried the last light of the day across the desert, Tessa knew her place among the people she had guided. She was not just a gunslinger, she was a teacher, a mentor, and a living proof that humans could carve worth from every moment they faced. Above all else, she had lived her truth, and in doing so, she had shown others how to live theirs. The legend of Tessa, the gunslinger who trembled not, would endure not for her victories alone, but for the lives she had touched, the courage she had inspired, and the understanding that worth, true worth, was never given. It was lived.